What's your Catholic drive time?
With Joe McLean and Emily Alcaraz.
But joining us by phone right now is Stacy Trasancos. She is the executive director of Bishop Strickland's St. Philip Institute in Tyler, Texas. She has a doctorate in chemistry, a master's in dogmatic theology, and 7 children. She worked as a chemist for DuPont before converting to Catholicism and radically restructuring her life. She left her career to stay home with her kids. From there, becoming a writer, speaker, and educator. And joining us by phone right now is Stacy Trasancos. Good morning and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Good morning to you too.
Praise be to Jesus. Thanks for being on with us today. Real quick before we dive into the more difficult parts of our conversation, midnight mass, early morning mass, what was your preference?
We have children, a lot of children, so we did several to accommodate all of their schedules. Midnight mass, yes. Vigil mass, yes. And then by the next morning, we were getting on a plane with all of our negative COVID-19 tests and all the face mask and sanitizer and heading north to see my oldest daughter and my oldest son. So big families keep you busy.
Yeah, here's the real Wonder Woman.
Right. That's pretty brave. We have 6 kids.
Plane.
We know what it's like. Well, praise be to Jesus.
Yes.
Conversation is not going to be the easiest one, but it's one I think is very necessary, especially on the feast day of the Holy Innocents, that we should be reminded of the dignity of the human life. But we see 2 articles in the National Catholic Register with Stacy that we wanted to chat about: how aborted children are used in medical research in 2020. And then the other one was how to object to an abortion-tainted COVID-19 vaccine. We're going to link to both of these stories on our live video feed over at facebook.com/GRN online. Let's start with the medical research one. Now, Stacy, we all remember the videos that came out with David Daleiden and how he documented the selling of human children whole to pharmaceutical research and other research. And it seems like we've given that a pass somewhat in our society. What say you? What did you find, and what was your article about?
Well, I have so much gratitude and respect for what David Daleiden did. And, you know, it took a lot of courage and planning to pull that off and get the attention of the whole country. But I remember thinking at the time that I hoped people would continue to pay attention because, you know, it was very sensational. I read scientific literature like some women read fashion magazines. Like, I've just always been interested in following the science, because if you read the scientific literature daily, you really get a sense of following the research that's going on in different fields. Well, one field that I have always followed is how aborted children and embryos, which are also aborted children, how they're used in research. Because, you know, I'm really good at spotting how they hide it with technical language, how they're not really upfront about it, but at the same time they have to report what they do because that's what you're supposed to do in a scientific paper. So I remember thinking when David Daleiden had all of those undercover videos and then he faced all of that legal stuff, you don't need to go to those extremes to know that what he's saying is true. You just need to look at the scientific papers because the scientists describe it in their own words. I mean, so to speak, in their own handwriting. They're admitting that they are literally putting the aborted children on the lab bench and dissecting them, butchering them, to get the organs that they want to do the research they want to do. This is a booming field in biomedical research because those little human bodies, from a scientist's perspective, who thinks it's ethical, if you're going to abort them, you may as well put them to good use. It's an unlimited supply of human organs to experiment on and learn more about human development and finding cures. And so this field of research is growing.
Now, do you happen to know if there's any sort of consent that needs to be made before these aborted children are used?
It varies. So they have something called an institutional review board, and what that amounts to at a university is a group of university-appointed ethicists agreeing that what they're doing is ethical. So there's really no outside approval process. So if they all agree that it's okay to use these babies with or without the mother's consent and do whatever they decide is ethical to do. They don't really have any higher supervision than that. So in some of the papers, it says the mothers were recruited. So they went out and sought the women who were having abortions and wanted babies that were going to live to a certain point, so they would be exposed to certain things in the environment enough months. They sometimes don't mention consent at all, and they sometimes just say the mother had consented, but they don't really say what the mother consented to. Abby Johnson, I know her, and she and I have exchanged a little bit about this. She says that, yeah, even when she was working in these clinics, that they would just tell the moms, do you sign the form for your child to be used in scientific research? Some good can come from this. So there's who knows really exactly what the conversations are at the moment of abortion, but I can totally... The ones that say they recruited women, I wouldn't be surprised at all to learn, and I'm speculating, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to learn that if they didn't encourage women to wait another month or wait a few more weeks because they needed a test cohort that was 18 weeks and beyond, or, because some of the experiments depended on the fetuses being a certain age to have been exposed to certain environmental factors long enough for them to then take apart the organs and analyze them.
Now, before we get into your article, Dr. Stacy, I just want to give a disclaimer to the listeners. This is going to be a little graphic. Your first example in the article, Dr. Stacy, is the fetal scalps that were grafted onto rats and mice. Can you go into what was this experiment about? What was its purpose, and how were aborted children used in it?
Yeah, and it is always hard for me to talk about. My husband can tell you when I found this particular article, all the vaccine stuff was going on about fetal cells, and I just remember telling him, like, people have to know it's not just fetal cells. And this one in particular, because the scientists describe in very aseptic language, they describe how they wanted to get full thickness human skin grafts. They wanted to show that they could cut down all the way to the subcutaneous fat and get the full thickness of the human skin and show that they could graft it onto mice and rats, rodents. And then at the same time, they were going to use, they called it a human skin and immune system humanized mouse and rat model. So from the same baby, they literally scalped the baby. They cut a section of the scalp off where there's hair growing, and down all the way to the fat, the whole thickness of the skin. And then on the baby mouse's back, they cut skin away over the rib cage, and they grafted the human skin there. But at the same time, after that, they took the mouse and they took some organs from out of the same baby that the scalp came from, and they put these organs, they transplanted them into the mouse, because what they wanted to do then was take this humanized mouse and give it a staph infection on the skin, and they wanted to see how the same organs internally would respond. So the aborted child is dead. They can't do an experiment like that. But if they have a fresh enough sample, a fresh enough baby that has just been killed, they can take the organs, transplant them into the mouse, scalp the baby, put the scalp onto the mouse, and let the mouse grow for a month or so.
Dr. Stacy, I need you to hold that thought
skin.
right there.
Okay.
Wish it was a better thought to hold on to. It's a very graphic one, and I think it illustrates the tragedy of the situation. But we're talking to Dr. Stacy Trasancos. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time, keeping you informed and inspired. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It is good to be on with you. We're having a difficult conversation, admittedly so, with Dr. Stacy Trasancos. She's got two articles that we called to discuss with her today. One is on scientific research on aborted children. And then there's another one that we've posted links to, and that's how to object to abortion-tainted COVID-19 vaccines. We've linked to both of these articles over on facebook.com/GRN online. I highly encourage you to read them. As difficult as especially the one on research is, and I think it should shock us to some degree to go, what have we allowed to happen? And we have to realize that this is big money in this pharmaceutical and scientific research realm, and it should shock us to realize that we're playing here with the dignity of the human person. Now, Dr. Stacy, welcome back to our show. Thanks for being on with us. Let me ask you a question. What would you say to someone who would say, but golly gee whiz, isn't the research going to help benefit the rest of mankind? Isn't this good and therefore tolerable?
This is the question that's going to be before us more than ever now that the church has affirmed, this is nothing new, the church has affirmed that we may benefit from these vaccines that were tested and produced and developed using a fetal cell line. So, in isolation, that was one child decades ago that was used in a similar manner, that was taken apart, dissected, cells were taken out of the kidney, and the cell line was immortalized or reproduced indefinitely. But it's really, I encourage people to try, I'm not arguing this from a Catholic perspective. I'm arguing it like St. Thomas Aquinas does from our opponent's perspective. If you're the government, so this fetal scalp research I was talking about was funded by the National Institutes of Health. It was funded by Dr. Fauci's branch of that institute. So the government funds this stuff. If you're looking at it from their perspective, they are doing this research to find cures and knowledge about human development. And we have already said as Catholics with this vaccine that we don't find it immoral to benefit from the research from things like this. So if you're the scientist or you're the ethical review board or if you're the government agency funding it or the private agency funding it, you aren't going to listen to Catholics when they say we object to you doing this, because you already know that whatever life-saving cures or whatever knowledge you find, Catholics are allowed to say, well, we are not cooperating in this evil by benefiting from this research. It was very remote. We didn't make the choice. It's not our fault this research was done. And in isolation, like with the vaccines, that is true. But I'm encouraging people right now, because I know about this research and I can find articles like this every day that I sit down in front of my computer. It is happening more and more and more because biotechnology has advanced so much. If you're the other side and you know Catholics really don't have any leg to stand on when they object, you're not even going to take them seriously when they say don't do this. Because you already know they're going to be allowed to benefit from the work. And that is the situation we're in. And I think, what happened with these vaccines, because there wasn't enough protest and the companies weren't forced to find ethical sources for us, we've really lost a lot of ground in this game now, because abortion's not just about a woman's choice anymore. It's about feeding a research machine that's only going to grow.
We're talking to Dr. Stacy Trasancos about her two articles. Again, we've posted links to them both. I want to transition a bit here in the time we have left to the issue over the vaccine, since it seems like there's a great overlap here. And there's been a lot of debate, conversation back and forth. We've seen how the Pfizer and Moderna, and we've seen their use of aborted fetal DNA in tissues as either a part of the development or part of testing to release this new vaccine. There's the issue over the vaccine itself being a new technology and not knowing what's going to happen. We've seen people have very adverse reactions to this, even on live video. But there's the issue over the aborted fetal DNA and tissues being used. Now, there's been a debate among Catholics, and some have said, well, it's so remote. I mean, we saw a Vatican statement. We've seen bishops come out to say it's okay to use this. It's morally just fine. It's so remote in this circumstance. The cell lines were so far back. It's not an issue. How do you address that, Dr. Trasancos?
Well, things were happening very, very fast, and there was something that got communicated from the science to the bishops It's one thing that troubles me a lot because it was speculation. This word called confirmatory testing that came from the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Some of the theologians then were led to conclude that the connection to the fetal cell line is very, 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 very remote, super remote, because it's just used in testing. But what the scientific papers were saying was they were using this human embryonic kidney cell line to test the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine. So they put the vaccine in the cells to see if the mRNA will make the spike protein like it's supposed to. So it's just they put it in the cells to see if it'll work. They're not growing it in the cells, but they're testing it in the cells. But the thing you do is when you go to production, it's called quality control testing. You can't even bottle water without a quality control testing protocol. And what we don't know yet is if they're going to do the same tests they did in the lab in production. So while the vaccine's being produced, they stop every so often, take a sample, put it in the cells, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. That's how you know that you're making the right thing. And there are very high quality standards on something like this. So to say that it was done in one confirmatory test, one-time thing, is not accurate. I don't know for sure they're going to do the testing in an ongoing way in production, but if they are going to be doing the testing in an ongoing way, then there will be an ongoing dependence on the fetal cell line to produce even the mRNA vaccines, which means they're no different ethically than the vaccines that are grown in the fetal cell lines. Either way, you depend on a continued supply going forward. So what I hope happens, these vaccines they're already here. There's not much we can do about it. And it's true if you need that vaccine because you're in a difficult situation and your health is at risk, or people you love, their health is at risk, or you even have to get it because you got to keep your job. Whatever you discern is your need. The church has definitely, and this is nothing new, again, this is the same with childhood vaccines. It is morally permissible to receive that vaccine. I am just, and my bishop also, Bishop Strickland, is the same, encouraging people not to forget about the rest of the story. That we still, whether you take the vaccine or not, even if you never even take the vaccine, we still have an obligation to fight this issue in our culture, because these children, it's just not right. We can't have science advancing by doing things like this. It's not going to end well. And so I'm just trying to get the rest of the story out there. Like we do make our own decisions about these vaccines, but in a way, even though we're not cooperating in evil, or we're very remotely cooperating in evil, in our culture, when we accept these vaccines, we are sending the message to the research institutions that we will not find it morally problematic to benefit from the research that comes from using these aborted children. And I don't know how we get around that now. I don't know how we make an argument that they're going to listen to, but we have to do something.
Now, Dr. Trasancos, we have about 4 minutes left in the interview. You wrote another article, How to Object to an Abortion-Tainted COVID-19 Vaccine. So can you share, for those of us who have a conscience formed so that we wouldn't feel comfortable receiving this vaccine, how can we object? How can we keep from having to be forced to receive it?
3 minutes to go.
Okay. Going back to the 2005 moral reflections from the Pontifical Academy for Life, one of the things they did affirm is that we should abstain from the vaccine if we can. And we should not receive the vaccines that depend on fetal cell lines unless we have no alternative. So the first thing to do is, make sure you really need it before you accept it, because the more people who say, no, I'm not taking that until you do better, the more our voice will matter in the market. But if you do need it, even then, understand that your acceptance of this vaccine is supposed to be temporary. We're supposed to keep protesting these practices until they make a change. And not being able to have much of a moral voice now, we can speak with our purchasing power. So the more that we keep demanding and saying if you would just do this ethically, Moderna and Pfizer and AstraZeneca, we would be all in. You would make it so that so many more Catholics and Christians would be comfortable receiving this vaccine. So there are ways to object, like contacting these companies directly, emailing them. It does matter at some point. Contacting representatives and senators, supporting the institutes. There are Catholic institutes that are doing ethical research. Support those. And there are even ways you can go higher and get into meetings at the FDA and the CDC and let them know, this is serious, guys. We're not just going to shrug and go away and accept this. We still want you to do better, and we're not going to stop talking about it and pressuring you until you agree to. And at some point, it's a consumer demand issue, and we can get their attention that way. It's worked before with the childhood vaccines.
All right. We're out of time. Dr. Stacy Trasancos, thank you for being on with us and discussing these very difficult topics today.
Thank you very much.
All right. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.